upskilling teams for the future is the number one thing that I would say in that people pillar that CMOs need to think about.
Hello, I'm Neil Perkin, the host of Think with Google Firestarters, and Firestarters is a series of insightful conversations with the interested and interesting of the marketing, advertising, and innovation communities. And today on the podcast, we're looking into the evolution of the marketing operating model, and we are fortunate to have the best person, I think, to help us discuss this. So Robin Charney is a partner at AAR, consultants to the marketing industry. And AAR have just completed a fascinating piece of research, surveying over 100 CMOs and doing a whole series of in-depth interviews with CMOs as well to really just understand how marketing operating models are changing. So let's get into it. Robin, welcome to Firestarters. Can I begin by just asking what your provocation is for the Firestarters audience?
Absolutely. Hi, Neil. Really a pleasure to be with you. Always enjoy a good chat with you. My provocation is that the how of marketing is just as important as the what of marketing. And by that, I mean that how you get stuff done in marketing to support your strategy is just as important as the strategy itself. In fact, I'd argue that without the right how, your what will fail.
Yeah, brilliant, fascinating. So lots to get into, I think, here, because the report had some fascinating kind of feedback in it. And I think one of the areas of which I wanted to start with actually is about the ability of CMOs to prove marketing's value to the board, because it was really interesting that they saw this as a key area of challenge, I guess. And also the need for marketing to drive commercial impact, to link it closer to commercial impact. So perhaps can you tell me a bit more about how CMOs can actually do that? So what's the issue here and how can they connect it through to commercial value?
Absolutely. So CMOs have really, I mean, in my view, had a really hard time over the last few years. The complex environment, the complex business environment, the complex consumer environment, political, change environment. It's quite relentless being a CMO these days. And add to that their job has been, in some cases, divided up and parceled out across the board. So chief customer officers, chief growth officers, all of these things that have really kind of helped fractionalize what the CMO does, and which just makes the job harder. So I guess my point of view would be that in order to prove marketing's value to the board, number one is either the CMO needs to control as much of the, I guess, conversation with consumers as they can, but also number two, they need to make friends with everyone and be a great collaborator, which to me means that there are three legs to the stool of being a great CMO. It's strategic rock stars, commercial acumen, and operational excellence. And that third one, that operational excellence bit, is where we're focusing and really trying to help give CMOs the tools to talk about and exemplify what operational excellence means through this operating model kind of framework and discussion. Because right now, I don't feel that there's a unified language for the marketing community about how to even talk about this. Right now it's kind of like a broken bag of spanners, which is, I've got some people challenges, I might have some platform, tech challenges, and I've got, my agencies are a bit all over the place. So by talking about it as a framework, as an operating model, we're trying to give CMOs and senior marketeers that language to talk about it at that board level in a language the board understands. Boards understand operating models. So that's kind of our secret mission in one sense, is to give CMOs more tools and the rigor to talk about it in a way that will keep them on the board or get them back to the board and really help them own that conversation rather than have to talk about it in a fractured, disconnected way.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something really interesting there, which was about the kind of ownership of that sort of customer conversation. So, I mean, do you think that the opportunity really that marketing has is to take far greater ownership of the voice of the customer, I guess, through the entire business?
Yeah, and not just the voice of the customer. I mean, we were all taught about the original Ps, not our Ps, but the original Ps, and marketing would own product and would own price and would not just be the promotion fee. So there is an opportunity. And as one of our Neds that we work with quite a lot said, marketing has to get their elbows out. We need some pointy elbows in marketing because this is our area of expertise. This is our domain. So I guess trying to kind of reclaim it and own it is really what will keep marketing or get marketing back on the board, because we are the ones who are expert in that area. There's no question.
Yeah, and I think I guess a related question to this idea of proving marketing's value, and it just feels like the complexity of marketing has just got way greater over the last few years. And I wonder what that means really for the role of the CMO. I think there was actually quite an interesting stat about 58% of CMOs agree that the role of the CMO is becoming more challenging and more complicated. So what do you think makes for a good CMO now, and what does this mean for the role?
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it's only 58% who thought it was getting more complicated. It is exponentially more complex than it used to be. But again, I think there's two things here. One is CMOs have to elevate themselves out of the weeds a lot of the time, and it's incredibly hard not to be dragged into the shiny new thing, AI, data, social, whatever it might be. It's very hard not to be dragged in because your CEO expects you to be able to have those conversations. But in terms of what do CMOs need to be elevated or stay on the board, it's back to the point of that three-legged stool and that operational excellence bit, which is the newer bit, and frankly, the bit that many CMOs are either less experienced in or downright reluctant to talk about, because it isn't the most sexy part of being a CMO. But I guess our view is that by building and fostering an operating model that is robust and resilient, it kind of lets you get on with the strategic and commercial value. Because if you're down in the weeds fixing, your briefing process, or if you're fixing your how do you connect your data to your customer, if you're fixing the little things, then you'll never get to the big things. So fix the operating model, make it robust, make it resilient, let it get on, and then focus on the other two legs of that stool, which is proving commercial value through your strategic brilliance and through the fact that things get done quickly, easily, probably less expensively, which will all add to the bottom line. So they are intertwined, but I guess the advice would be fix the operating model so you can get on with the other stuff.
Right.
But it will drag you down if you don't.
Yeah. And so, I mean, getting into the operating model, it was the report, you got your four Ps, as it were. So people, partners, process, and platforms, which is the tech bit. And there was, I think, really interesting kind of feedback in all four of those areas. But I mean, let's start with people, because it seems like there's lots of change happening here. So just not least with organizational design or structures. And I think almost half of CMOs having restructured their teams in the past year, and over a quarter intending to do so in the next 12 months. So, clearly there's just so much change here. What's behind, do you think, that kind of continual, almost it seems, continual restructuring? What's behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it's number one, it's exhausting for the people being restructured all the time. It creates a very unsafe environment, I think, for a lot of people. But in terms of what's behind the restructure, I can't quite figure out if it's rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, or if it's done. Obviously, it's done with purpose. But what they're trying to achieve, I think, varies across industry and across reorganizations. Sometimes it's pure cost savings, and many businesses are looking to save costs, and obviously people are a big cost. But I think they're trying to get it right for the future. Right. And I think what they're trying to do, from in our experience and from what I'm told and what I hear when I work with clients, is they're trying to break down silos. They're trying to get collaboration at the heart of what they do. They're trying to make marketing work more effectively with sales, or if it's a global local challenge, get the local teams to work with the global teams. They are trying to solve quite big embedded problems, but the fact that it's happening so often seems to show that just moving things around and moving names on a chart is not the answer to the actual symptom.
Yeah.
And my hypothesis there is that if you move everything around but don't subsequently change the other elements of your operating model, specifically ways of working and process design, and manage that change, it will always fail.
Right. So I guess the 4 Ps are really intertwined, really, is what you're saying there.
100%.
So I mean, one of the interesting things you mentioned about collaboration, breaking down silos. One of the challenges, I think, seems to be around this idea of a two-speed approach. So the idea basically that you still need to have these sort of traditional large-scale campaigns, which will take time to come to fruition and work on. But then also you've got this kind of rapid always on type of content, which is just about being more agile and adaptive and just so the idea of being able to balance both of those, the different speeds and cadences that those two things work to. Any advice there really on how CMOs can get that right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's very much around a balance of skills and having the right people for the right job, but also having, I guess, the model beneath it to support those two operating models. So having the processes and the platforms and the partners there to help support the two speeds. And, let's be honest, Neil, that fast speed, that always on content, churning out high volume, perhaps lower crafted messages will be automated in the near future or the near future. Right. So
yeah,
having the operating model and the people and the processes to support that change, yet another change that they're planning for, is super important. So what skills do marketeers, in that operating model of fast, always on, what do they need to be adapting? And what do the marketeers in the more brand building, brand strategy, long-term big ideas, box need to have as well? Because our survey showed that there was a skills gap across both types of marketeers, right? The craft skills that we grew up with and hold dear around brand strategy, customer insight, planning, are lacking according to our survey. It's a real gap, and it's showing up in how marketeers work with their agencies as one. So, what does the agency have to kind of step in to fill versus what the marketer can do? And on that kind of fast-paced, always-on skills, it's adaptability to that change. Where's the line between what they do and what the AI, for lack of a better term, will do, and how are they adapting that model to suit that change, because it's imminent. So there's, sadly, no lack of change, but excitedly, quite a lot of change, depending how you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think actually it's really interesting because you mentioned about the idea of a content operating model almost within a kind of broader marketing operating model. I guess, and you mentioned partners there as well, and I'd like to sort of bring that in because obviously this is really important to this idea of like the content operating model. And again, there was some interesting kind of feedback there about lots of change. And one interesting, or a couple of really interesting stats in particular, actually, about I think it was over 40% of CMOs developing in-house capabilities, so planning to bring more in-house, but another 40% actually planning to re-outsource things to agencies.
Yes.
What's going on there? That feels like it's sort of productive. It's
a real hokey cokey, isn't it? It's fascinating because I guess my theory there is that those who are bringing more in-house have nailed it. Basically, they've got the operating model working and they are ready to scale. And that, to me, comes down to strategic planning for it, a very clear business case, like why are we doing this? And please hand to above, it can't just be about saving money.
Right.
That's not the reason to do it. It can be about speed, it can be about brand cohesion, but it can't just be about speed, because those are the ones, funnily enough, it can't just be about saving costs. Those are the ones who are putting it back out, because funnily enough, they didn't save as much money as they thought they would, that they promised the board, because the business case perhaps wasn't as robust as it needed to be. There's a lot of people who have just switched it up very quickly and said, forget it, we're just going to bring it closer. we'll save a bunch of money, it'll all be fine. And lo and behold, 2 years, 3 years later, it's hard, it's slow, the processes aren't there, the tech isn't there, because there's an investment for this, for it to be successful. And maybe that wasn't accounted for. So in my experience, those are the ones who are saying, this is too hard. We just didn't, it's too hard to unpick. And those are the ones who are giving it back to the agency community. And the ones who are bringing more and scaling are the ones who have really nailed it.
Okay. And do you think, I mean, it's interesting that there's probably lots of benefits, potential benefits from that you're getting from working with external partners, aren't there?
Massive.
So what would be other things that actually are beneficial for CMOs to think about with external partners rather than bringing everything in-house?
Absolutely. I mean, I think lots of the smart thinking CMOs really understand the value of agencies and the ongoing value of agencies and where they fit in the operating model. But for big, creative, strategic, long-living ideas and platforms, 100% that kind of top-tier creative and media agency, really do play a really valuable part to CMOs as those, helping them lead the charge on that strategic leg of the stool. And interestingly, what we're also seeing there is a greater integration between creative and media agencies. In the news at the moment, the pitches that are out in the marketplace, so many of them are about bringing creative and media, ironically, back together again, because CMOs want that integrated strategic thinking, but above all else, to the point of the complexity, they want simplicity. They want simplicity in their operating model with their agencies.
Right.
They want integrated thinking. So that simplification, I guess, goal is really what I think and what we see as part of what's driving that move.
Yeah, let me dive into that in a bit more detail, because that's so interesting, isn't it? That media creative is kind of coming back together again, having sort of existed separately for so long. I think it was over half of CMOs actually in the report were talking about that is a key area of focus or a challenge that they see coming up. So you mentioned about simplicity. What is it that how is it simplifying the operating model for CMOs?
I mean, at a very basic level, it's just less agencies to manage, less account handling, less POs, less admin in some ways. And you can't underestimate, when you have a big creative or media agency, how much resource both sides are putting into managing that relationship, making sure things happen, ensuring it all goes smoothly. So just from a pure kind of admin point of view, that's a huge benefit, but also a real kind of holding each other to account. One lead, both sides, hopefully, one clear plan, one clear go to market. It makes a massive difference, because then everyone who needs to be in the room at the right time is in the room together at the right time, and you're agreeing and planning and strategizing together. And it sounds really basic, doesn't it? It sounds really kind of course that's how you should do it, but operationally that hasn't been the case for so many brands, and I think it hurts them. I think it does.
And I guess it strikes me that also it's never been more important to get them integrated, because one amplifies the other, right? So
Absolutely.
Great media can really amplify the impact of great creative, and it feels like that's more true than ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the role of media thinking upstream cannot be underestimated, but also the measurement. And again, back to proving marketing's value to the board. If you're not thinking about your media from a measurement point of view right at the beginning, from writing that first brief, then you will never prove marketing's value to the board.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And one thing I wanted to ask, well, I guess this takes us a bit into process now, actually, as well, because one of the pieces of feedback, there was several CMOs quoted in the report as talking a bit about this idea of outcomes-driven approaches. So I guess what you're saying there relates to that. So tell me a bit more about what is an outcomes-driven approach and why are we heading in that direction?
Well, exactly that. Back to that commercial value. It's not about how many people we reached with the campaign. It's not about how many campaigns we did. because there are plenty of brands that I've worked with who just think that more is more and more is better, and that's proving that marketing is seen to be doing. But I think if you kind of put it on its head and look to an outcome-driven approach, it will free you in many ways, because you will do less, you will be focused on the right things in the right way, and you will again prove the value. The outcome is that we sold 100 more boxes of whatever it was we were selling,
Yeah.
or 1,000 or 1,000,000. So that's the outcome marketing wants to drive. Or we increased our brand perception by X. Those are outcomes. It's not just we did 20 campaigns this year rather than 5. And
Yeah, right. And is it also about allowing a degree of flexibility and adaptability in how you achieve the outcome? I suppose what I'm thinking about here is that if you're outcomes focused rather than outputs focused, I suppose, it means that you're more likely to actually be able to adapt your strategy to improve the outcome. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And back to that point about the integrated agency model, it gives agencies, these are the outcomes we are trying to drive. You are not being measured on how much you do. You are being measured and remunerated, hopefully, on what change you drive in our marketing and what outcomes we support, so that it frees a lot of people to do their best work.
Yeah. And I suppose staying with the process bit, one of the kind of key barriers potentially here is dependencies, isn't it? Just having those kind of bottlenecks which almost inevitably kind of arise. So obviously efficiency is really kind of high on the agenda for CMOs as well, to make sure they're delivering value but in an efficient way. So what are the kind of bottlenecks and dependencies that you're seeing, and how can CMOs kind of unblock those dependencies?
Yeah, I mean, some people hate process. They don't even want to talk about it. They think it's a dirty word. They think it's a constraint. They think it will slow things down. They think it will make everything worse. And I think I probably was one of those people in the past. I think I've come around, and I will shamelessly steal from Adam Morgan here in calling process a beautiful constraint, which is you've got to operate in a sandbox. You have to give yourself some rules, or it will be chaos and it will be miserable. And those bottlenecks can be, I guess, named and dealt with, but you've got to have the framework to recognize them and kind of call them out and figure out how to do with them. Legal will always be legal. Compliance will always be compliance. The sales team will always be the sales team. Those things are not going away. But if you plan and you bring them into the tent, so to speak, and discuss how to navigate those challenges, then you will design something that works for everyone, that everyone's bought into, that everyone agrees with. And then when our AI overlords come and you automate all those processes, happy days, because you've got the groundwork there. If that groundwork isn't done, it will be even more painful when someone from some department says, that's something you can automate. Some person with a clipboard will show up and say, that can totally be automated. Why are you still doing it that way?
Yeah.
And it'll be much harder. So this is groundwork, I think, for things that you and I have talked about, what will be automated and what won't. But I think some processes and certainly approvals, those things are certainly on the list of things that could be improved with AI.
Yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it? About just getting your process right before you then automate it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I guess one thing just related to that is about the growth or the rise of marketing operations teams. Now, we're obviously talking about the marketing operating model, which is the how of how marketing gets done, of course. But marketing operations teams are really deliberately within marketing teams. They are focused on specifically process and efficiency and so on. So why have we seen such as kind of growth in these kinds of roles?
Yeah, I think partially because somebody needs to, own this. There need to be conductors on the train line, and I see the ops team as the conductors or the air traffic controllers or the engineers who are helping to design the right system to make the trains run on time. And it's interesting because you're starting to see a real spread in maturity between different organizations and their marketing ops functions. Smaller teams might just have one person who is in charge of the budget.
Right.
very large organizations might have really sophisticated marketing ops teams who are everything from MarTech to process to reporting to budgeting to annual planning. Like there is a maturity curve there, and it's interesting to start to see how how the spread is happening across that. But it's central, and without it, it's very hard to do that role on the side of your desk. And there are many organizations that are just at that tipping point where they're like, we think we're ready to build something here and to put some resource behind it. But as ever, there aren't many teams adding a lot of FTEs. There aren't a lot of teams with tons of money splashing around saying, let's go hire 3 or 4 new people. So
Yeah.
it's often people already in the organization who are kind of promoted, call it what you want, into ops. And those are the engineers. And I think they're invaluable to a marketing team.
Yeah, and I mean that sort of takes us nicely actually into platforms, because this is like the tech piece.
Yeah.
But one of the, I guess, most interesting things that came out of that, I thought, was about just how many CMOs feel like they're struggling to get value from their existing MarTech or marketing technology investments, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose the ops team would be naturally focused on how you can get the most out of technology. But why do you think it is that so many CMOs feel like they're just not getting the value out of the systems that they've already got?
I'm sure there's a direct connection to what we talked about at the beginning. It's partially how they collaborate with their colleagues at the C-suite level, the CTO or the CIO, and their influence within that. So, how much marketing resource are in those teams, if any? Is marketing an important customer or a less important customer? How that operating model was thought about. What outcomes were we trying to drive with the technology we bought? How many Ferraris were we sold, and can anyone drive them? Did we plan for the change and the teaching of how to drive those Ferraris when we onboarded them? Often not, sadly. How that operations team is empowered really to think about what's really needed and the business case behind it. So those 3 legs of that stool of strategy, commerciality, and operational excellence applies to each of the P's in some ways, and especially when you're talking about technology. What is the commercial value here? What is the strategic benefit? And what outcomes are we trying to drive with this technology? So, and that's a really hard one, because so much tech has changed in marketing, and there's been so much buying and acquiring for the sake of buying and acquiring in some places, but connecting it all, in my view, in my experience, has been the challenge. So, and that's why so many I don't think anyone's shopping for lots of new stuff, but what they're shopping for, what they're trying to solve, is that connectivity issue. Again, in readiness for the changes that are coming technologically, and the AI challenge, and being able to really have everything connected in a way that allows you, again, to be ready for the change and to scale what you're doing. There's AI is a perfect example. I don't think I have a single client that isn't doing something with AI, but I don't think I have any clients who have scaled AI. So what does that mean?
That's quite an interesting question, isn't it? Because AI obviously came up a lot, and
Yes.
So and I think it was like 97% or something of CMOs said it's going to radically reshape marketing. So it's a huge change, obviously, but it feels like it's potentially going to impact every single one of those 4 Ps, right? And so what? But it's still quite executional. So it feels like where we're at the moment is still quite sort of optimization, executional focus, looking forward, kind of task-based efficiencies and so on. So what are you seeing really in terms of how CMOs are really thinking strategically about AI and how its impact on the marketing operating model?
Yeah, I think we're still very much in that exploratory phase for many of them, which is, what's the real opportunity? What's the realness of it? And what impact will it have? And in some ways, it's quite hard to almost, even as a consumer, get your head around what could really happen here. And then you go, wow, it's almost too monumental a change for some people to even digest.
Right.
Me especially. So, could AI completely replace the marketing function? Hopefully not. I don't know, maybe, I doubt it, but these are very existential questions. So it's quite hard to develop an operational plan. So I think that kind of testing, learning, scaling, understanding where the real value is, what outcomes it drives, and how it makes the lives of marketeers better, really, and how it drives better customer experience. I think that's where they should be focused for now. But no one really knows where it will go, or how much it can do. It could completely disintermediate parts of marketing that we hold dear and we think of as part of our Ps. So it's unnerving for some, and I think add that to the context of organizational change, those skills gaps that we talked about. I think it's almost like the role of the CMO from an AI point of view is to kind of be very clear on what you are and aren't thinking about in some ways, because the mind can wander, can't it, Neil, and kind of go, oh, how far will this go?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a good point, actually, you make there about focusing on customer and also employee experience. How can it actually make customer and employee experience better? But I guess your question about skills is quite an interesting one, because it does really feel like there's a bit of a lag at the moment. And, in raising AI literacy amongst teams, the technology is just going so fast and skills seem to be sort of lagging behind. So do you think that is something that CMOs need to really address and get better at?
Upskilling teams for the future is the number one thing that I would say in that people pillar that CMOs need to think about. It's upskilling for the future, upskilling for the foundational skills that all marketeers need, and fortifying the team, for lack of a better term, to be future ready and to be resilient and to be and to feel psychologically safe in their roles. So there's that kind of, I hate the word soft and hard skills, but it is that balance between those two things. But feeling empowered to understand what AI can do for you in your job and what AI can do for the organization, I think is massively important, because it will take away any fear factor.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned psychological safety there. I mean, that's such an interesting point, because it feels like that is coming out really. The focus actually that seemed to come through the report on culture and the kind of way in which people are working, and particularly that sort of point about the need for psychological safety within the team. Why do you think it is so important for teams to be able to kind of share their thoughts and inputs and contributions, and to have that kind of psychological safety in the team right now?
I think it's massively important, and I think it is a direct result of this constant change that people are feeling less safe. Right. I speak to clients every day, and at the coalface, the constant change, the change of direction, the reorganizations are having a direct effect on those marketeers at the coalface. And I think CMOs are running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it's hard for the 20, 50, 200, 500 people behind them to keep up. What are we doing today? I've had clients describe these conversations as, or the environment is a bit of whack-a-mole. What are we going after today? And
right.
And I don't think anyone can feel psychologically safe in those environments, that they need to understand where we're going, what my role is in that plan, and how I can help support the marketing strategy. So I think that's where this whole conversation that CMOs have around psychological safety is just, how do I take people on the journey with me and make them comfortable with constant change? Because I don't think that's going away.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. And I think one of the other interesting sort of more general kind of points that came out actually unnoted was about significant minority, I suppose, put it like that, thought just didn't know where to start with a marketing transformation. So, I mean, what would your advice be to a CMO that knows they need to change but doesn't quite know where to start?
Yeah, I think it's figure out what's screaming the loudest in some ways. So between your 4 Ps, have an honest assessment of where your pain points are, and what, I always talk about kind of 2 speeds of solution. What are the quick wins that will build confidence either from the team or from the board in the changes you want to make, and what's the longer term kind of transformation plan that you need to go on. And I guess my point of view, my provocation will be that these are, they're not fast, these things. Sometimes they take years, and they need teams, and they need resource, and they need support, and they need air cover, because transforming an operating model for the future is one of those tasks that's kind of always on the to-do list. It's just a matter of, how big or small those particular projects will be. It could be something as simple as a skills audit for your team to get them future ready for AI, or something as broad as completely transforming your agency operating model to really reshape it with the right partners doing the right work in the right place. Or it could be as simple as a campaign planning process, like, okay, let's get our hands around this, let's get our arms around this.
Yeah.
How do we plan and execute campaigns at this speed and at this speed? So it can be quite simple and digestible. But I guess if I was going to say, one thing for each of the Ps, I would say, for your people, just upskill and simplify and fortify them, right? Give them the skills they need, be clear about what you expect from them and what you need to succeed in the future. On that partner side, I would also say, that simplification and clarification of role and remit, internal, external, what I always jokingly call the geography question, what goes where, what capabilities sit where, and what are their responsibilities. Really simplify and clarify that, because I think that's quite an easy win for a lot of clients and a lot of brands. It's manageable to get your arms around your agency model and to really kind of get it future ready. On the process side, I would say build and embed. And building without the embedding is the danger zone for me, because if people aren't with you, they will reject you, right? I'm glad that's your process. I'm not doing that. Or no one asked me if that's how I want it done. Bring them with you, please. And on that platform side, I would just say connect and scale. Like, you don't need more kit probably, but you need to connect it all, and you need to be able to scale it.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I'm going to ask one final question, if I may, because you've highlighted some really really good advice out of each of the 4 Ps there. But just to kind of bring it together at the end, I think one of the things you said before now is that it would be a mistake to treat marketing transformation as a side project. And so tell me a bit more about what this means in terms of how CMOs can really lead effective transformation in their marketing operating model.
I think they can lead it by having a clear strategy around it, and giving as much attention to that operating model conversation and outcomes you want to drive as you do about your annual or your 5-year strategy. When you're sitting in front of with your peers or on the board, and you're discussing the role of marketing in the business, operational effectiveness and resilience in that op model will mean that you can move at the speed of change that you need to move at. You will never be able to move at speed if you're dragging a bag of spanners behind you.
Right. That's so nicely put. And Robin, that has been so insightful, really fascinating. It's clear that marketing and the marketing operating model are undergoing lots of change right now. So it's great to get your insights into that. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share, of course. But my thanks to Robin for being so insightful. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Neil.